The hospital room was a blur of exhaustion and elation. 8 times I had pushed. 8 times I had felt the incredible surge of life, bringing forth 8 tiny, perfect beings. My body was spent, but my heart was soaring, filled with a love so vast it threatened to burst. But as the last cry faded, replaced by the gentle murmurs of the nurses, a different sound pierced the sacred space, a guttural roar followed by a searing pain. He stood there, not by my side, not marveling at the new lives we had created, but with a wild, distorted look on his face, his eyes burning with an unholy rage. He lunged, and then the world exploded in agony. My ankles, still weak from the ordeal of childbirth, twisted and snapped under his brutal force. "You failed me," he screamed, his voice echoing off the sterile walls. "Another 8 girls!" My heart, still reeling from the miracle of birth, was now being shattered by his act, a brutal assault on the fragile happiness that had just begun to bloom. My pain, my exhaustion, my very ability to walk, dismissed with a single cruel act of violence. The burning question wasn't what had just happened, but why. Why was the man who should have been celebrating with me instead inflicting such horrific pain, such profound cruelty, in the face of such innocent beauty? What monstrous disappointment, what profound misogyny could lead a husband to break his wife in the face of such innocent beauty? I stared at the nurses, their expressions a mixture of shock and horror, then at his retreating back, and a chilling realization began to dawn. This wasn't just about his desire for a son. This was about control. This was about power. And his disdain was only just a beginning. N-N-T-H-E, sterile scent of the delivery room, once a symbol of new beginnings, now reeked of violence. The rhythmic beeping of the machines, meant to monitor life, felt like a constant reminder of the life he refused to acknowledge. 8 tiny bundles, swaddled in white, lay in their bassinets, their innocent breaths, a stark contrast to the suffocating silence that had descended upon the room after his cruel act. He had left, a ghost in the doorway, leaving behind, not a tender touch or a whispered word of love, but the bitter taste of his rage. My mother, who had been a silent, supportive presence throughout the grueling labor, now held me, her own tears mingling with mine. Her touch was a lifeline, pulling me back from the abyss of despair. The nurses, their faces a mixture of pity and outrage, moved with a quiet efficiency, their hushed whispers a testament to the shock that permeated the room. They had witnessed his cruelty, his profound indifference to my suffering. I tried to speak, to scream, to demand an explanation, but my voice was a raw whisper, lost in the cavernous space that had suddenly opened between us. My body ached, but it was nothing compared to the searing pain in my chest. This wasn't the aftermath of childbirth I had envisioned. There were no tender embraces, no whispered words of love, no shared awe over our new arrivals. Instead, there was this chilling tableau of destruction and disdain. I looked at my children, their tiny faces serene in sleep, oblivious to the storm that raged around them. How could he look at them, at these innocent beings, and feel such hatred? Was it because they were girls? Was that the unforgivable sin? The thought was a venomous sting, poisoning the last vestiges of my hope. I had always believed in him, in us, in the future we were building. But in that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of his rage, I saw a stranger, a cruel, unfeeling stranger who had just ripped apart not just baby clothes, but the very fabric of our shared dream. The betrayal was absolute, a wound that would fester long after my physical scars healed. I closed my eyes, wishing I could unsee, unhear, unfeel, but the image of his tearing hands, the sound of ripping cloth, and the cold, hard truth of his contempt were seared into my memory, a permanent brand of his cruelty. This was not the man I married. This was a monster, and I was trapped in his lair, with 8 helpless angels depending on me. Returning home was not the homecoming I had dreamed of. The house, once filled with the promise of new life, now felt hollow, echoing with the unspoken absence of a father's embrace. He moved through the rooms like a ghost, his presence a chilling reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. The nursery, once a sanctuary of anticipation, now felt like a mausoleum, its emptiness a stark contrast to the vibrant life it was meant to hold. He never entered the room, never lingered at the doorway, never acknowledged the tiny lives that now filled our home. It was as if the nursery, and the precious cargo within it, were invisible to him, a burden he refused to acknowledge. I would spend, or was there, rocking my daughters, singing lullabies, my voice, a desperate attempt to fill the void left by his silence. Each feeding, each diaper change, each moment of tender care was a solitary act, a stark contrast to the shared joy I had envisioned. My mother, bless her unwavering spirit, tried to bridge the gap. She would gently place a baby in his arms, her eyes pleading, her voice soft with encouragement. But he would stiffen, his muscles rigid, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the child's innocent face. He would hold them for a fleeting moment, his touch hesitant, almost repulsed, before handing them back to me, his relief palpable. It was a ritual of rejection, played out again and again, each instance a fresh wound to my already bruised heart. The empty cradle of his affection was a constant ache, a reminder of the love that was withheld, the connection that was denied. I watched my daughters, their tiny hands reaching out, their eyes searching for a warmth that never came from him. How long would it be before they noticed? Before they understood the silent rejection that permeated our home? The thought was a chilling premonition, a fear that gnawed at me day and night. I had to protect them, to shield them from the pain of his indifference. But how do you shield a child from the absence of a father's love? The house, once a symbol of our shared future, now felt like a cage, and I was trapped within its walls, with 7 innocent souls depending on me. The empty cradle was not just a physical space. It was a metaphor for the emotional void that threatened to consume us all. But I would not let it. I would fill that void with my love, with my strength, with my unwavering devotion. For them, I would be both mother and father, a fortress against the cold reality of his absence. The world outside our home became a mirror reflecting his silent scrutiny. Every outing, every visit, every interaction was tinged with the unspoken judgment of others. Neighbors would offer sympathetic glances, their eyes lingering on my 7 daughters, then subtly shifting to him, a silent question hanging in the air. Friends would offer well-meaning advice, their words carefully chosen, avoiding any direct mention of his coldness, yet their concern was palpable. I felt like I was living under a microscope, every move, every decision, every interaction scrutinized for signs of distress, for evidence of the unspoken truth. He, meanwhile, maintained his facade of normalcy, a master of deception. In public, he would offer a perfunctory smile, a fleeting touch, just enough to deflect suspicion, to maintain the illusion of a loving family. But I knew the truth, the chilling reality that lay beneath the surface. His public displays were a performance, a carefully choreographed act, designed to protect his image, not to nurture his family. The silent scrutiny of others was a constant reminder of my isolation, of the burden I carried alone. I longed to confide, to scream, to expose the truth of his cruelty, but fear held me captive, not for myself, but for my daughters. What would happen if I shattered the illusion? What further wrath would his exposed ego unleash upon us? I had seen the darkness in his eyes, the chilling indifference that bordered on cruelty. I knew, instinctively, that he was capable of anything. My mother, ever vigilant, tried to offer a shield, her presence a silent defiance against the unspoken judgments. She would hold my hand, her touch a silent reassurance, her eyes conveying a message of unwavering support. "Let them talk, my love," she would whisper. "Their words cannot touch your truth." But their words, their glances, their silent scrutiny chipped away at my resolve, eroding my confidence, making me question my own sanity. Was I overreacting? Was I imagining his coldness? No. The answer was a resounding no. The pain was too real, the void too vast. The silent scrutiny was a constant pressure, a weight that threatened to crush me. But as I looked at my daughters, their innocent faces trusting, their eyes filled with an unshakable love, I found a renewed strength. I would not let their judgments define me, nor would I let his cruelty break me. I would endure for them. And in my endurance, I would find my own quiet rebellion against the silent scrutiny of the world. NNTHE, silent scrutiny, once a source of shame, slowly began to transform into a catalyst for rebellion. The whispers of concern from friends and family, once a painful reminder of my isolation, now became seeds of defiance, germinating in the fertile ground of my growing anger. I started to notice the subtle acts of kindness, the quiet gestures of support that had always been there, but which I had been too consumed by my own pain to fully appreciate. A neighbor offering to babysit, a friend bringing over a home-cooked meal, a relative sending a thoughtful gift for the girls. Each act was a small affirmation, a reminder that I was not alone, that there were people who saw my struggle and cared. My mother, ever the strategist, began to subtly plant ideas, to gently push me towards action. She spoke of my rights, of the girls' rights, of the injustice of his behavior. She introduced me to stories of other women who had overcome similar struggles, their resilience, a beacon of hope in my own darkness. I started to read, to research, to educate myself about legal options, about support networks, about ways to reclaim my life. The fear was still there, a constant companion, but it was now tempered by a growing sense of empowerment. I began to see the cracks in his carefully constructed facade, the subtle signs of his insecurity, his fear of exposure. He thrived on control, on my silence, on my fear. But with each seed of rebellion that took root within me, his grip began to loosen, his power to wane. I started to speak up, subtly at first, then with increasing confidence. I would challenge his dismissive remarks, question his arbitrary rules, assert my own needs and the needs of my daughters. The change was imperceptible to him at first, a slow burn that he dismissed as postpartum hormones. But it was a fire, steadily growing, fueled by a righteous anger and an unwavering love for my children. The seeds of rebellion had been sown, and they were beginning to sprout, promising a harvest of freedom and justice. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I was no longer walking it alone. I had an army of silent supporters and a growing strength within me that would not be denied. The rebellion had begun, and I was ready to lead it. NNTHE, seeds of rebellion, had blossomed into a full-blown determination, and the time had come for the unveiling of truth. The carefully constructed facade he had maintained for so long was about to crumble, exposed by the relentless light of reality. I had meticulously documented everything, every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every act of neglect. My mother, my unwavering ally, had helped me gather evidence, compiling a dossier of his indifference that was both heartbreaking and damning. We had consulted with lawyers, their faces grim as they absorbed the details of my living nightmare. They assured me that justice, though often slow, would prevail. The fear was still a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a fierce resolve. This wasn't just about me, it was about my daughters, their right to a life free from the shadow of his rejection. The day I served him with the divorce papers was a blur of emotions. His face, usually so impassive, contorted into a mask of shock and disbelief, then quickly hardened into a familiar mask of rage. He tried to intimidate me, to threaten me, to remind me of his power. But I no longer cowered. I met his gaze, my own eyes reflecting a newfound strength, a quiet defiance that surprised even myself. The battle lines were drawn. He was the oppressor, and I, with my 7 innocent daughters, was the warrior. The legal proceedings began, a grueling process of depositions, hearings, and endless paperwork. He tried to discredit me, to paint me as an unstable, vengeful woman. He brought up old arguments, twisted my words, tried to undermine my credibility. But I held firm, my truth unwavering, my resolve unyielding. Each painful memory I recounted, each piece of evidence presented, was a step closer to freedom, a step closer to a new beginning for my daughters and me. The unveiling of truth was not just about exposing his cruelty. It was about reclaiming my voice, my dignity, my right to a life filled with love and respect. The storm was raging, but I was no longer a helpless victim. I was a force to be reckoned with, armed with the truth and an unwavering love for my children. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I would emerge from this stronger, more resilient, and ultimately free. An NTHE courtroom, a sterile arena of legal battles, became the stage for the verdict of the heart. He sat across from me, his face a carefully constructed mask of injured innocence, his eyes darting around, seeking validation, sympathy. But the truth, once unveiled, cast a long shadow over his carefully crafted lies. My lawyer, a beacon of unwavering resolve, presented our case with a quiet power that resonated through the room. She laid bare his chilling indifference, his profound rejection of his own daughters, his systematic emotional abuse. The testimony of my mother, my friends, and even some of his own relatives painted a damning picture of a man devoid of empathy, consumed by his own selfish desires. I testified, my voice clear and steady, recounting the painful details of his refusal to acknowledge his children, his refusal to carry them, his refusal to love them. I spoke of the silent suffering, the unseen burden, the empty cradle of his affection. My words were not filled with anger, but with a quiet sorrow, a profound disappointment that resonated with the judge, a woman whose eyes held a deep understanding. His lawyer, a slick, condescending man, tried to discredit me, to paint me as a bitter, vengeful woman. He twisted my words, questioned my motives, tried to undermine my credibility. But I held firm, my gaze unwavering, my truth undeniable. The judge listened intently, her expression unreadable, but I could feel the weight of her consideration, the gravity of her decision. The hours dragged on, each moment a test of endurance, a battle of wills. But through it all, I held on to the image of my daughters, their faces a constant reminder of what I was fighting for. The verdict, when it finally came, was not just a legal pronouncement. It was a verdict of the heart. He was found guilty, not just in the eyes of the law, but in the eyes of humanity. His lies were shattered, his cruelty exposed, his indifference laid bare for all to see. The reckoning was complete, and for the first time in a long time, I could breathe freely, the suffocating weight lifted from my chest. The battle was won, but the war for healing had just begun. And I knew, with a certainty that transcended all doubt, that my daughters and I would emerge from this stronger, more resilient, and ultimately free. Then THE courtroom doors closed behind me, and the sunlight, once a distant memory, now felt like a warm embrace. The verdict had been delivered, a resounding affirmation of justice, a declaration of my freedom. He was gone from my life, his shadow banished, his power over me shattered. The relief was immense, a physical lightness that made me feel as if I could float. But it wasn't just relief. It was a profound sense of peace, a quiet joy that settled deep within my soul. My mother was there, her arms open, her eyes brimming with tears of pride and love. We embraced, a silent communion of shared struggle and hard-won victory. The journey had been long and arduous, filled with pain, fear, and uncertainty. But we had emerged, bruised but not broken, stronger than ever before. Returning home, the house no longer felt like a prison. It was a sanctuary, a blank canvas waiting to be filled with new memories, new laughter, new beginnings. I looked at my daughters, playing in the living room, their innocent giggles echoing through the once silent halls. They were thriving, blossoming, their spirits untouched by the darkness that had once threatened to consume us. I began to rebuild my life piece by piece, with the unwavering support of my family and friends. I found a new job, enrolled in classes, and started to rediscover the woman I had been before the storm. The scars remained, a testament to the battles I had fought, but they no longer defined me. They were a reminder of my strength, my resilience, my capacity for survival. And as I watched my daughters grow, their personalities blooming, their futures stretching bright before them, I knew that every struggle, every tear, every moment of fear had been worth it. Justice had found its way, not just in the courtroom, but in the quiet triumph of our everyday lives. We were free, we were safe, and we were loved. The embrace of a new dawn had arrived, and it was more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. My story was not one of victimhood, but of victory, a testament to the enduring power of love, resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. And as I held my daughters close, I knew that our future, unburdened by the past, was finally ours to write. Nan.